Well, for more on the impact of terrorism on the global economy and tourism, I spoke to Sean O'Grady. He's an associate editor for The Independent, a British online newspaper. I asked him how cities are assuring tourists they'll be protected from future terror attacks.
Well, I think it is important. I'll show you, if I may, our London paper, the London Evening Standard, and I hope you can see the headline there about the new police operation. And it's very important for the authorities to tell people in their own country and around the globe that these cities are safe. The authorities take tourists and visitors' safety very seriously indeed, and they're investing and they're doing something about it. On the other hand, you don't want to alarm people. You don't want to make people think that these sort of attacks are an everyday occurrence, which they're not, thankfully. And every day, the authorities are working hard behind the scenes, as well as with publicly released stories like that one, to ensure that London and other cities are safer than they have ever been.
France allows citizens from 10 countries, including Russia and India, to get tourist visas within 48 hours. In terms of some of these visa processes, how does that help and also hurt the industry?
Well, visa processes are very, very important for Western countries in particular to get the tourists in. And one of the problems and complaints that are directed at Britain and other countries is that the visa requirements for people, high-spending tourists, for example, from China, are much too restrictive. It takes them too long, and it's just as easy for them to go to Paris. So great cities like Barcelona, Paris, London, Rome, Madrid, they're all in competition for visitors from all around the world, and they need to make sure that, yes, they keep the baddies out, so to speak, but they do welcome the tourists, and they do make sure that tourists have a good and secure time when they get here. And keeping the baddies out is a funny business because they don't all come from abroad, or they don't all smuggle themselves in as refugees or asylum seekers or something like that.
So then, security-wise, what do you think cities and perhaps governments should be doing in terms of how they fund, where they put their resources so that they can be most effective both before, during and after an attack?
Well, one of the best things they can do is ensure that there is a rapid response from the police immediately to such attacks, as we had in London in Borough Market. It was 8 minutes between the first attack being reported or happening and the armed police coming to the scene and getting rid of the terrorists. There were 3 terrorists on that occasion before they could do any more harm. So that's a very important aspect as well. Another important aspect is making sure that all the hospitals in the area, the health service in our case, is fully drilled and fully ready for casualties as they come through so that lives can be saved if people are injured. And the third thing, as I say, is just the general effort on intelligence. That's much the most important thing. And in Britain, the authorities tell us that many, many terrorist plots have been stopped because the police and the security services have managed to get tip-offs from various communities about what's going off, and by what people call snooping and other intelligence gathering, and they managed to stop them, and that's much the best thing.
Now, one person's intelligence gathering is another person's invasion of privacy. So what can be done to really strike that balance, not just from governments, but also private businesses who still want that influx of tourists, but aren't really sure about the privacy concerns?
Well, it's very hard. It's very hard indeed to strike the balance. And the only thing you can do is to have a very, very thorough public debate about it. And in Britain, it's gone like a sort of pendulum, one way and then the other, depending on the sort of severity of the threat, depending on how people feel about civil liberties. A few years ago, the government relaxed the amount of surveillance that could be done by the authorities. And now they're talking about bringing that back in order to have a better idea about what's going on. But in the end of the day, it is an enormously difficult and labour-intensive job to do that. The wider thing, which the British government has done and has had some success with, is to change hearts and minds, if you will, to make sure that radicalisation and alienation in places like prisons and some extremist preachers in places of worship and so forth, from the Islamist side, and also the far right mad men and women who might threaten us from the other side, that we go in and we talk to those people and we try and persuade them about what's wrong with what they're picking up. And also on the internet, which is very much more difficult to control, of course.